Hare Krishna. Reflections on India's Daughter. The documentary India's Daughter depicts in a blood-chilling way the horrible gang rape of Jyoti Singh and the cold-bloodedness of the perpetrators of this ghastly crime. It also depicts the courage of Jyoti Singh and the progressive mindset of her parents in trying to take her to success in her life. Any incident of violence, especially rape and a brutal rape like this, is regrettable and reprehensible, and it deserves to be strongly condemned and punished. And to find sustainable solutions to this crime, this kind of crimes in general of violence against women, we need to look deeper at the causes. And in any treatment, diagnosis of the problem is vital. If there's a wrong diagnosis, the whole treatment can go wrong. And this is where many times in the media the diagnosis is simplistic and suffering from overgeneralization based on pre-existing biases. So in this talk I'll discuss about how there is misrepresentation of the cause in this particular movie as well as in the media in general, and then I'll talk about what are the ways in which what are the root causes, and what are the ways in which this problem can be dealt with. The movie talks about, this particular documentary gives a lot of time depicting the mentality of the rapists and the utter lack of any regret and the self-righteous tone is horrible. But to extrapolate from this and to say that this is the mentality of men in general in India is horrible. It is just like extrapolating that because there are some even a significant number of Muslims who become terrorists, so all Muslims are terrorists. Now this will immediately in today's media be criticized as Islamophobia. So we have something of the converse over here, wherein a particular mentality of a particular social pervert is labeled as the mainstream mentality, and this is nothing but Hinduphobia, wherein the whole culture of India is being maligned as a culture of rapists. In fact, the German professor who in a German university who refused admission to Indian students, saying that Indians have a rape problem. Of course, the German chancellor condemned the statement and she apologized eventually. But this just indicates the gravity of the problem. So this sort of generalization is a misrepresentation, and this misrepresentation does more harm than good. Now this is not to say that there is not a grave problem of safety of women and there is not a grave problem of crimes against women, but there is definitely a problem. But to extrapolate it, this is the general mentality of all Indian men, and this mentality comes from the traditional Indian culture, is a horrendous misrepresentation. Because if we look at the agitations that have happened, there have been men who have participated in the agitations for the prosecution of the rapists and for stronger rape laws in general. So that's the first point. Now, apart from this movie itself, apart from this documentary itself, we can look at other instances where the data gets sensationalized and misrepresented. There were two girls who were found in Uttar Pradesh in Bidon to be hanging from trees, and then immediately in the media the narrative came, oh, these were lower caste Dalit girls and they were raped and killed by higher caste men. And that's how the rape narrative, the crime of rape was sensationalized by further talking about the evil of the caste system. Now subsequent investigations revealed that actually the women had not been raped. First of all, the women did not belong to the Dalit caste, nor did the men belong to the upper caste. Both of them belong to the OBCs, the other backward castes. And the CBI found that the narratives of the various relatives were incoherent, and the parties had been bribed to give a particular narrative. And the conclusion was that actually it was not a rape, it was suicide. So now this was hardly reported in the media because they did not fit the pre-existing narrative at all. So the theories that we like, we call them facts, and the facts we don't like, we call them theories. So the theory we like, the theory that is being spread today is that, especially in the international media, European media, and to some extent the American media, is that India is the rape capital of the world. And so whatever supports that is being propagated. Now, if we look at it, when Indians try to protest against this is that India is just a hurt national pride which is blind to the actual problems. So that sort of things are being circulated. But let's look broadly at statistics. Now, the statistics show that the problem of rape, now to try to talk about statistics while dealing with a problem of such great human suffering can seem dehumanizing, and that is it's not that because there are less number of rape crimes that the problem is less. The problem is definitely there, and every instance of this ghastly crime has to be taken seriously and penalized seriously, and the solution has to be pursued seriously. But the misrepresentation of the problem does a disservice in finding a lasting solution to the problem. So statistics can to some extent help us to understand the pervasiveness of the problem and the misrepresentation in calling India the rape capital. So if we look at statistics, headlines came in the newspaper that 3 women are raped per hour in India. But if you look at United Nations statistics say that actually in Belgium 1 rape is reported every 3 hours. Now this might seem 9 times less, but 3 women raped per hour in India is in a population of 1.25 billion, whereas 1 rape in every 3 hours is in a population of 11 million. In England and Wales alone, where the population is less than 56 million, there are 78,000 rapes. This means 9 rapes per hour. Or if you want to look at it another way, because rapes per hour doesn't really depict the population. So according to United Nations 2010 report, there were 1.8 rapes per 100,000 inhabitants, whereas in Belgium there were 30 rapes. There are 27.3 in US and 28 in the UK. Now, of course, the standard counter to this will be that rape is a hugely underreported crime in India, and that is true not just in India, but that is true all over the world. In the American organization called RAIN, which is involved in countering rape crimes, said that actually only around 3% of rape victims will spend, rapists will spend even 1 day in jail. So the rate of persecution of the crime of rape is low everywhere. And even if we say that then a crime is underreported. That underreporting happens everywhere in the world. So if we say even 1 out of 10 crimes is reported in the West and 1 out of 100 crimes is reported in India, still the statistics, if we see 1.8 rapes per 100,000 in India and 30 in Belgium or 27.3 in US, 28 in UK, that means still the number of rapes in India statistically turns out to be less. Now somebody might argue that the police are not accepting the rape cases, or because the social stigma is so great that people don't report, whatever it is. That means ultimately, if we want to believe a theory, whatever facts we get, we just neglect the facts. So as a American comedian once said, I've already made up my mind, don't confuse me with the facts. Don't confuse me with the facts. That means that if I'm not interested in the facts, then how have I made up my mind? Now, if we go further, apart from Europe also, in the Islamic countries, the reporting of crime, of rape crimes is far, far lesser, because it's extremely difficult in those countries within Islamic law to get punishment, get persecution, to get the rapist punished, and quite often the woman is also penalized. So the reporting is much lesser over there. So now this is not at all to trivialize, to minimize the problem of rape in India, but this is to highlight the unfairness, inaccuracy of labeling India as the rape capital. So if rape is, as the statistics suggest, a grave problem all over the world, and what is the cause of it and what is the solution? Essentially, rape centers on objectification of the victim. Now, where the person, the rapist, sees the victim not as a conscious person with feelings, but as an object to some end. It can be lust, where one wants sexual release without considering the other person at all, or it may be seen as power, where one stamp one's authority on somebody else, and rape is used as a tool for humiliating the other person. Systematic gang rapes are often done during ethnic cleansing campaigns, where one group brutalizes the women of another group which they are victimizing and they are eliminating. So the point is that whether it is power, whether it is political agenda for eradicating a particular race, or whether it is raw lust, the point is that rape centers on objectification of the other person, of the victim, where the victim just becomes a tool for a particular end. And this objectification comes naturally as a consequence of a materialistic way of life. The materialistic way of life focuses on thinking that material things are the only reality and material pleasures are the only pleasures. So controlling others, dominating others, using others for our gratification becomes a natural concomitant result of the materialistic worldview. And the objectification of women happens in the mainstream media today, the same media and the same culture which demonizes rape. Often that same media glamorizes the objectification of women, wherein even in mainstream entertainment, whether it is Bollywood or Hollywood, women are depicted frequently as sex objects. And beyond that, there is a pornography industry where women are depicted as nothing less other than sex objects. At least in movies, there is some acting talent, there is some dancing, singing talent, there is some artistry over there. But the pornography industry has become far bigger than even the world's biggest sport industries. The porn revenue in America exceeds the combined revenue of all the franchises for basketball, baseball, and football. So the point is that this is where objectification of women is being done in a completely unabashed way. Now, when people's minds are polluted by this kind of terribly sensualized depiction of women, then naturally people want to act it out. Some people may quote some statistical surveys to show that pornography doesn't necessarily lead to violence. But this is simply misleading. If what we see doesn't lead us to act accordingly, then the whole advertising industry would become pointless. And the big companies which pump millions, even billions of dollars in their advertising campaigns, they do so not because of they wanting to do some social service. They do so because they know that what is depicted in the media, whatever is enacted in the media, people will want to enact it themselves in their lives. So even if statistics are misrepresented or are inaccurate and they don't depict a correlation, that is a misunderstanding. Whatever is depicted will be enacted sooner or later. So objectification of women happens because of materialism, and one prominent way in which objectification is happening is through what is called the entertainment industry, especially the pornography industry. Now, in the Western and Westernized cultures, there is increasing freedom for women. Now, and freedom for women in terms of the careers that they can pursue, the choices that they can have. And this seems liberating for women. But still, even in these countries, there is still fear. And the crime of rape is there everywhere in society. As I said, statistics show that it is there equally in the Western world also. Now, in India and in countries where the traditional culture is still there, there is a different dimension to the conflict which is there. See, the problem of objectification of women, the problem of violence against women, the problem of potential violence against women also, that has been dealt by most traditional cultures by a certain division of labor amongst males and females. And the purpose of this division of labor was not to restrict women, was not restriction or deprivation, but it was cooperation and harmonization. So the division of labor, say, wherein women mostly did housekeeping duties and they were homemakers and they assisted their life partners, that was a partnership. It was not a domination or subordination. And this partnership aspect is seen most when there is a spiritual an orientation to life, when there is an understanding of the spiritual purpose of life. So when men and women both understand that we are at our core spiritual beings and we can get lasting satisfaction by realizing our spiritual side, by developing ourselves spiritually and connecting ourselves with the supreme spiritual being God, and by developing our love for Him, we can get the highest satisfaction. And so that is so we have a vertical relationship with God and we have a horizontal relationship with people around us. And the horizontal relationship and the vertical relationships are meant to be symbiotic. A strong relationship with God enables us to see other living beings as family members in God's family. And we see our life partners not just as my husband or my wife, we see them as connected with God. And that's why marriage has been a sanctified union in most of the religious traditions in most of the traditions of the world. So the strong vertical relationship strengthens a horizontal relationship. because the connection with God brings higher satisfaction, brings wisdom, and that brings tolerance and accommodation in mutual relationships. And a good horizontal relationship also strengthens the vertical relationship, because we are when we are satisfied emotionally, when we have warm relationships, we also have a peaceful mind by which we can devote ourselves to God. So now in the traditional cultures there has been this division of labor, which was meant ultimately for the purpose of facilitating both men and women in their onward spiritual journey. So now, over the as time has passed, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that all good things deteriorate over time. Sakale neha mahata yogo nashtah parantapa. That by the passage of time, whatever spiritual purpose is there in the social structure, the spiritual purpose gets lost. And that's what has happened. And what has remained today is not the spiritual purpose, but the cultural shell. And when people have lost an understanding of the spiritual purpose, and when everybody has a material definition of success, then the traditional culture seems restrictive. And so the idea that women should only be homemakers seems very restrictive. And how the spiritual purpose of life is to be pursued in modern times is an emerging challenge that every tradition has to deal with and is dealing with. In the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada adopted quite a dynamic approach. So although he talked about the traditional model of how women lived in his books, but in his life, when he was dealing with women, when he found them enterprising, when he found them intelligent, when he found them dynamic, he encouraged and inspired them to serve Krishna according to their talents and to do justice to their talents and to make fulfilling contributions to society. So the important point to recognize is that whatever a social model is there, the social model is meant to facilitate the growth of the human beings who are a part of that model. So Srila Prabhupada was flexible and dynamic in channelizing individual talents, whether they be males or females, according to what was best suited for them, according to what they were best capable of doing. So the point is that as times have changed and the spiritual purpose of life is neither traditional nor modern, it is time independent, it is eternal, and that needs to be pursued if there is to be lasting satisfaction, and that is the foundation for any sustainable social transformation also. So with respect to India and in the Indian culture, there is, without an understanding of the spiritual purpose of the traditional gender arrangements, of the traditional division of labor among the genders, without an understanding of the spiritual purpose, there is on one side the liberal demonization of the traditional culture, and there is the conservative insistence on that culture, with neither focusing on the purpose of that culture. So we have liberals saying, oh, this is a culture where women are restricted, or there is so much female, there is misogyny, there is hatred of women in this culture, and the whole culture gets demonized, and that narrative is what is portrayed prominently in the media today. But at the same time, this narrative gets aggravated when there are extremists at the other end. There are ultra-conservatives who insist on a rigid replication of the traditional culture without being sensitive to modern circumstances. So, for example, now in the particular movie, in this documentary, India's Daughter, it is depicted that the lawyer of the rapist, he says that it is not our culture for women to go out alone or with their boyfriends at night, and the rapist says that we wanted to teach her a lesson for doing this. Now, who gave them the authority to teach the lesson? The, this, these people are misappropriating the cultural values that were there in the culture, promoting an agenda of male chauvinism. And not even male chauvinism, this is worse than male chauvinism, this is actually this, female suppression. So what is happening here is that any social structure is as good as the people who are participants of social structure. So the social structure, when it becomes, when its spiritual purpose is lost, and it becomes a tool for power-hungry people to implement their agendas. So this happened with the caste system in India, and this has happened with even the system of division of labor among the genders. So the point here is that the culture had a spiritual, the cultural arrangements had a spiritual purpose, and that spiritual purpose has to be pursued. When now in India we have this huge division. This is depicted in India's Daughter also, that there are there are some people who are progressive, they want to become educated and they want to advance in their job and their career, and they are forward looking and forward thinking. And then there are other people who are in poverty, they are the victimizers, and they wreak havoc in the lives of others. So the point is that there is the objectification of women to which everyone is exposed. And in the West, there is a culture of, the widespread culture of consensual sex, whereas in India, that culture is not there. So there are people who are exposed to the objectified depiction of women, whether it be in Bollywood or whether it be in through the internet. Nowadays, with smartphones available, porn has become available even to people who don't have proper houses, who have cell phones with them. In the Shakti Mills gang rape that happened in Mumbai, the rapists, they actually had porn on their cell phones, and they force the victim to do the various things that were being depicted in the porn. So the point is that the objectification of the women, which is done through the mainstream, through the mainstreaming of porn in today's society, that creates wild desires in people, and then those wild desires people try to fulfill in whatever way they can, and then they use that to justify, rationalize that using the excuse, the alibi of the culture. So when we talk about the broad culture of India, we have to understand that this culture centered on a healthy respect for women. The Vedas declare that in a house where the women are not happy, the gods will never shower their blessings. In the Vedic culture, women are traditionally referred to as Devi. In ISKCON, whenever a woman gets initiated, she is given the name Devi Dasi. Devi means goddess, and goddess is a name indicates a great respect. And when a woman comes to the house, women in the house are often considered manifestations of Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune. And even from the empirical point of view, we will see that actually in India, if we're just going to say that, insist on the narrative of female domination, then India is among the few countries which has had a female as the head of the state. One of the strongest heads of state of India, Prime Minister, was Indira Gandhi. America, despite its history of progressiveness, how many female president heads of state it had? Not even one till now. So the point is not that the point here is simply that we that that even from the empirical point of view, as I said, in today's society, how the spiritual purpose of which is the solution to the objectification of women. When, as long as we tend to see women, as long as we have a materialistic conception of life, then naturally there will be objectification of women, and that objectification of women happens in the West, and that happens in India. But in India, there are some people who rationalize their violence against women by taking the alibi of the traditional culture, and this is demoniac, and this is a horrendous misrepresentation of the culture. So India, as I said, with its tradition of venerating the female goddess, India has many states where woman has been the chief minister, and there have been women heads of state, and there are women who have been not in power and yet in power through a remote control kind of government. The point is not that any of this is to be endorsed or to be depreciated. The point is, if you're just looking for objective facts, the story in India is much more complex than what is depicted by the simplistic demonization of the entire Indian culture. What we need for healthy relationships between male and females, and for a healthy society at large, is a broad spiritualization of human culture. It is only when we understand ourselves as spiritual beings, we understand others as spiritual beings, then can we avoid their objectification. And that spiritualization is very strongly encouraged, facilitated and intellectually boosted by the spiritual wisdom of India, by the Bhagavad Gita, by the tradition of yoga, by the tradition of bhakti. If you look especially at the tradition of bhakti, many of the greatest saints in the bhakti tradition have been women, and they lived and thrived even at a time when there was the patriarchal culture that was predominant in India. So the spiritual devotional culture is a culture of universal empowerment, and it is a culture which goes beyond the outer shell, whether it be male or female, and focuses on the essence of the person. That is the soul, the spiritual essence, and it helps in bringing out the best within the person. So that is why actually people all over the world are adopting the spiritual practices of India: yoga, meditation, prayer, bhajans, mantra meditation, singing, kirtans. These are being adopted by people. Why? Because they find that it helps them to grow internally, grow spiritually, grow holistically, and it is this inner growth that will bring a more humane vision of humanity. It will prevent the objectification that is inevitable when there is rampant materialism. So, if we want to understand the root cause of the problem, it is not just a simplistic demonization of the whole Indian culture based on the mindsets of some perverted individuals. We have to look at the broad objectification of women coming from the materialism and coming from the spirit of materialism, and that plays out in various ways when it interacts with its traditional culture. In England itself, in certain parts of England where the Muslim population was in large numbers, so at many of the Muslim youth were regularly used to engage in raping the local girls over there, but the police could not charge them because they would be targeted as racially singling out certain people, and the crimes of rapes went on and on for years and years without any action being taken. So the point is that the interaction of various social forces and how that causes, how that comes from the objectification of others, and how it plays out, it will vary. And the so in India also it is playing out in a particular way, where misunderstanding of the traditional culture among both the liberals and among the conservatives, where the liberals who simplistically want to demonize it, and among the conservatives who simplistically want to impose it without being sensitive to the modern concerns, that is causing this massive misrepresentation of the problem. So the solution is countering the objectification, and that countering of objectification happens through spiritual education and spiritual elevation of consciousness, by which we all start seeing each other as individuals, as spiritual beings, and not as objects or tools for one's own gratification. Thank you.